Hey everybody, it is Lacey from the Content Direction Agency, and this is your weekly content debrief, your 15-minute actionable content marketing information that you can take away, your executive debrief for the week that you can take away and hopefully apply to your own content marketing strategy as well. As I said, my name is Lacey, if you're not familiar with me, and today we are going to be talking about how to know when it's time to outsource any task, really, but when to know it's time to outsource your content. And so it was really interesting when I started thinking about this. This was one of the questions I got asked in my first Facebook Live on here this year, like that people indicated that they were interested in. So if you're here, if you're hanging out with me, give me a like, say hello so I know you're here. But what I found was that people were really interested in knowing, how do I know when it's time to outsource something like content marketing? But this really applies to anything, any task in your business. And so I was curious about like what other entrepreneurs thought, people who are maybe a little further along in your business, in their business than you are. How did they make the decision and know when it was time to outsource? So I asked. So I went into a couple of my communities and I asked some people, how do you know when it's time to outsource or hire for a task? And I got some really interesting responses. Rebecca Tracy from The Uncaged Life said she knows it's time to outsource when something starts to make her cry trying to figure it out. And I was like, oh God, Rebecca, don't wait till it makes you cry. Do it before then. But I mean, it's a good emotional gut check, right? If something's really upsetting you or it's really frustrating you, it's probably time to let somebody else do that. Miriam Schulman said, when you can pay someone less than what your time is worth, or if you can't do it yourself, or if someone can do it better than you. So I thought that was really interesting too, because a lot of times as solo entrepreneurs, we get started, digital entrepreneurs, we get started as solopreneurs, right? We start with just me and the computer, right? That's how I started. I'm sure that's how a lot of you guys have started. But that tends to make us think that we are the only ones that can do it, especially if you're starting out on a budget, right? But as you grow in your business, at some point, there's this tipping point, right? Where somebody else can do this other thing better than me, right? If my job is not web design, then somebody else can probably design my website better than I can. And then I also liked the other part of her statement, when you can pay someone less than what your time is worth. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Gemma Wentz said when she knows it's time to outsource when she finds all the reasons not to do the thing. So if you're procrastinating a lot on something, that might be a really good reason. And I know that happens a lot with blogging. People are like, well, I know I should blog, but I don't have the time. It keeps falling off my to-do list. I have a million ideas, but I never make time to write them. That might be an indication it's time to start looking into outsourcing. Denise Duffield Thomas said when it's 2 a.m. and you're stressing about it, that's a good, that's kind of in the same line as Rebecca's, like when it makes you cry. And then Adrienne Dorison, who is a coach I'm learning from and also a client, she said when it's not my primary role, aka when it's not the thing that is the highest value I add to the company, and it's something that will happen more than once. So that's a really good distinction there. Like if it's just something you got to do once, one and done, you may or may not choose to outsource it. But when it's something that happens over and over again, and it's not your primary role in the business, that's a really good indication that it might be time to outsource, right? So let's talk about that for just half a second. So Adrienne Dorison runs Run Like Clockwork, which is the training arm of the Clockwork book. So if you've not seen this, Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Profit First, also wrote this new book just last year called Clockwork, and it's about how to make your business run without you, essentially, right? How to set it up so you can take a vacation once in a while. And Adrienne is his business partner, and she runs the training arm. And I've been working with her since last June on clockworking my own business, right? But she talks a lot, and Mike talks about this in the book, a lot about What is your primary role in the business? And so many of us do things that are not our primary roles, right? And until you understand what your primary role is in the business, you may be doing things that are not a good use of your time and energy. So like a really great example of this would be like, let me think of a good example. So like if you are a hairdresser, and so your primary role is serving your clients, right? But you get roped into, oh, I have to do inventory in the salon, and I have to check everybody's hours, the other hairstylists, and I have to do all the advertising for the salon, and I have to, whatever, all those things. That's not your primary role, right? Your primary role is hairstylist, serving your clients. So there are other people that could do those things, right? So I find this happens a lot with content as well. So somebody starts out as a solopreneur, they're super excited, they know they need to market, so they start writing their blog. And a lot of times people are good writers. They maybe even enjoy it to some extent, right? They don't mind writing their blog, they're good at it. But as they grow in their role as CEO or in their role as business owner, blogging becomes less and less important, right? It becomes less and less a part of their primary role in the business, aka being the business owner. Whether that's you're making a product, whether that's your service-based business, it doesn't really matter. Your role evolves over time, right? And so at some point, you are better served outsourcing tasks like content creation when somebody else can do it just as well, or maybe even better, and for less money. So I said I would come back to that. A really important thing to know is like, what is your hourly rate, right? Even if you don't have an hourly rate, what is your hourly rate? Like, what are you worth? What is your time worth to the business in an hour? And then ask yourself, like, how many hours am I spending writing a blog post? And so if you're here watching with me live or even watching on the replay, I would love to know if you know, on average, how long does it take you from start to finish, from idea to publish, how long does it take you to create a blog post for your business? Because I'm just curious what that looks like for people. And a story I love to tell is about my friend Michelle Mazer. Several years ago, she contacted me to see if we were a good fit to do some content work for her. And we were talking on the phone, and she was saying, you know, it takes me about 4 hours a week to write my blog post. And I was saying, well, you know, that's 4 hours you could get back in your life. And so I gave her the prices and we talked about it. And she said, okay, I need to go away and think about it. And I said, no problem. That's fine. And like less than an hour later, I get an email back from her that said, you know what? If I spend those 4 hours coaching, I will make way more than your fee. So this is definitely worth it to me. So basically what she was saying was if she got even one extra coaching client in that 4 hour block that she was currently spending writing her blog post, she would pay for my services. And if she got if she could book 4 coaching clients in that 4 hour block, she would way more than pay for my services, right? So that was like a no-brainer for her at the time. She's since moved on to podcasting. We parted ways friends, of course. But at the time, like that made total sense for her and her business, that if she could use that time being in her zone of genius for her business, making that money, bringing home the bacon, it would more than pay for the cost of outsourcing it, right? So I think that's kind of the first place. How to know when it's time to outsource something is like, if you hate it, that's a really good place to start. The very first thing I outsourced in my business was finding images for my blog posts, because as much as I do like to blog, and as much as that is one of my highest contributions to our business, I hate finding the images. So that was one of the first things I outsourced when it came to content, was finding a graphic designer to find and create the image that would go with each blog post. So if you hate it, that's a good indication. If it is taking up way more time than you think it's worth, right? So like if you could make more money in the hours it's taking you to write a blog post, then it's probably worth it to look into outsourcing, right? So always ask yourself, what could I be doing with those hours if I wasn't spending that time doing blogging, doing content creation. And maybe it's not just content creation, because let's remember this, friends, content creation is only the first half, or maybe like the first 20% of the game, right? Because you have to spend all this extra energy and attention promoting the content, because if you don't promote it, you could write the best blog post in the world and nobody will see it, right? So maybe it's not even the content creation that's so much. Maybe the part that you need help with is all the promotional activities. Maybe it's some combination of the two, right? And then the last question to ask yourself is like, is this something that only I can do in the business? And this is a really tricky one. There's this great exercise in the Clockwork book where Mike has you write down the top 6 tasks you do in your business, like the top 6 most important tasks, and you write each one on a Post-it note. And then you go through and you say, okay, if I absolutely had to get rid of one of these tasks, which one would I get rid of? And you take one away. And then you keep doing that until you get down to the last Post-it note. And hopefully that's your most important role in the company, right? But when you're doing when I was doing this in Florida last June, like I had put like all kinds of things like invoicing and billing, right? Because if I don't invoice my clients, nobody gets paid. That's a big deal. But like I had to pull that one off because that wasn't the most important thing I could do. So when it comes down to it, if writing content is not your most important task in your business, then almost certainly somebody else can do it. I've only run into I could probably count on one hand the number of businesses and business owners I've met in my 7 years of doing this business that truly could not outsource their content. And a lot of people have to come to that themselves. It's a mindset thing, especially if you've been doing your own blogging for a long time. You feel like, well, it's disingenuous, right? If I don't blog anymore, or if I use a ghostwriter, I'm lying to my readers, right? I mean, has anybody had that thought? But the point of the matter is, it can still be your ideas, can still be your thoughts. It's just someone else is doing the work of translating them into a blog post that's going to have great results for your business, right? Because I don't think it's disingenuous for me to take the original thoughts and ideas of one of my clients and put it into a blog post. All I'm doing is taking the work of translating those ideas and putting them on the page, right? So that's a mindset thing you'll have to come to terms with in your own heart. But in truth, I have only met a very few people that really couldn't, for whatever reason, their work was so technical or their work was so personal that it would take more effort to tell the writer, the story, or teach the writer how to do the thing than it would take for them to write it themselves. Most of the time, our clients are perfectly capable of downloading their ideas to us in whatever format makes sense. It could be on the phone, could be in an email, could be they send us a video. And then our writers are mostly journalists, so they're really talented at taking that information and synthesizing it into a blog post that's written beautifully and, actually meets the goals as the business. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say today about how to know when to outsource content, when it's time to outsource content. If you have questions, I would love to answer them either now, or if you're watching the replay, you feel free to leave them in the comments and tag me, and I'll come back and answer them. I also want to share, I'm going to pop it in the comments, the link to this week's blog post, and I go into this in a little more depth. So if you're still curious about this concept, or like you're still trying to wonder, is it time for me to outsource some of my content? I highly recommend go over and read what I have to say in the blog post, or let's have a chat. If you go to lacyboggs.com/undercover, there's an application there, fill it out, and I will get back to you. I read them all personally, and I'll get back to you and we can get on the phone and talk about, is it time? Is this a good place? And I promise you from the bottom of my heart that I never try to sell somebody on outsourcing their content when they're not ready for it, because it's not good for you and it's not good for me. So I only want to work with people who are ready. So I'll give you my true and honest professional opinion about whether I think outsourcing content would be good for you and your business. So If you enjoyed this today, thank you so much for sticking with me, those of you who are watching live and watching on the replay. If you enjoyed this today, please give me a like or a comment below. I love producing free content, and if you get anything out of it, the way you can pay for it is to give me a like, a comment, or a share. Share it with your network. That way more people will see it, and that's a wonderful way to pay it forward both to me and to other people in your network. If you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know in the comments below. And I will see you again next week at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Sorry, I had to do the little county thing there. When I'll be talking about another fabulous content debrief, 15 minutes actionable content for your content marketing needs. Love you guys. Talk to you later.